Better than my mom just saying, don't go around, because she didn't know where I didn't.
Yeah, that's the truth. You'd be swinging out of the top of a tree.
Or something, getting hurt, getting in trouble.
Okay, I think we're ready to go. We had 3 people not able to make it tonight between the 2 teams. David Jackson had sinus, some kind of procedure to open up his sinuses today. Karen was out with Power and Tyler.
Yeah,
Harvey is in Austin.
Harvey's
Can't get home for the ice through Dallas. And then Sandra called me just before this our 6 o'clock meeting and said that their son Chris has been diagnosed with a brain tumor, and they were just in shock and trying to figure out a way to get to Oregon to be with him this time. He's been having headaches, so let's remember them in prayer especially. But let's open in prayer and we'll get started. Father, we thank you for your love for us, and thank you for these people that are willing to serve and to seek your wisdom on our selections for our church. And pray, Father, that you give us wisdom and discernment of the person you have picked out for us in both cases. Father, we are humbled by the opportunity to serve you. Father, we pray especially for Chris Spinks and for this David and Sandra and their family. Pray, Father, that you would work through this difficulty, and pray that your healing hand would be on Chris and that you'd perform miraculous wonders that we can praise you for. And thank you, Father, for Gary and his willingness to come help us out tonight. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Fortunately, I had Greg lined up to help us video this, just in case we had people that couldn't attend tonight. Plus, my son and his church, First Baptist Mineral Wells, is got a search going on, and he wanted, when he heard we were doing this, he wanted to have a chance to view this also. So y'all are actors tonight for me. So we'll go ahead and start. I've got a short introduction here, and then Gary will take over and really tell you the good stuff. Thanks for coming, and thank you for serving. This is a big responsibility, and I thank you for sacrificing your time and your wisdom in what we're doing. In 1980 or thereabouts, I had my first supervisory position at Eastman, and I was charged with hiring operators for the plant I was leading, and a plant like it that was going to be started up in 2 or 3 years. And when I got into that job, I had no clue about how to select people. I was an engineer. Give me a math equation or tell me to size a distillation column, I could do that. But how do you size up people for the job that you've got? And so I would develop these questions, and they turned out to be like IQ tests, because I would ask the question, and anybody that was smart enough at all would know what answer I was looking for, because they were such simple questions. And
if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
But it was, and I did weed out a few that didn't have the IQ to give me the right answer, but I hired way too many that were not the best fit. And some of them we pounded those square pegs into round holes, and some we had to let go. But shortly thereafter, Eastman started this targeted selection interviewing process, which was a godsend for me, and it really helped me to better identify what it was I wanted in a candidate, and how to determine what that person, whether that person sitting across the table from me could fill that role. And the difference was night and day in how comfortable I felt in interviewing and selecting people. So what's that got to do with us? We're not hiring operators, but we are praying fervently And we know that God has the right person for us out there somewhere. And we could pick the very best person for the job and get that person, or we might pick someone that we think is good enough. It may not be God's choice for us quite, but He might let us do that. But we have to have God's leadership for sure. But He's not going to bring anybody in here and sit them in that chair where Bobby's at, and they're going to have a halo over their head, and we're going to,
That's the guy.
that's the guy.
Is mine on straight?
Yeah, that's good.
So
That's how you say.
I think we need to equip ourselves to be able to ask the right questions and get the hopefully through that as part of our process, not the whole thing, but to ask the right questions to give us and insights into who the right person might be. Another reason is that references are just terribly unreliable. Yeah, and in fact, I talked with a search committee member recently at another church, and they had gotten reference from someone who had worked with the person that they were interviewing, and they talked with that person, a staff person at another church, and the person just had the most glowing things to say about that individual. And then they thought, well, wonder why he didn't give us the references for other staff members that they worked with. And so they got to exploring around and talked to another staff member and said, oh, you don't want to hire that guy. So we'll see all kinds of experiences with references. And sometimes we won't get any references. Our attorney has told us not to give references, good or bad, for the legal liability that it creates. If you don't give everybody glowing comments, then someone might sue us because we withheld, or we discriminated, or we spoke falsely about them. So there are lots of opportunities for us to not do much with references. We probably should check them out and take what we can, take what we get with a grain of salt. But so we've got some things that we need to learn, and I think this process will help us. You've seen Gary. I've known Gary for many years. I served as a deacon with his dad at First Baptist Church in Longview, and Gary and I worked together at Eastville. Maybe that's an applicant.
That was
A lot of towns in Texas.
Gary heads the HR department at Eastman, and Gary is an accomplished recruiter. And that's known not just in Longview, but in other corporate areas of the company. And he hires engineers, accountants on campus. And the thing about Gary is he goes in looking for not just technically strong people, but people with good interpersonal skills too. And that's so important, especially with engineers, odd ducks. And so sometimes these odd ducks don't work well together with others, and they're not future leaders of the company. And so Gary is good at ferreting out some good candidates. And I've seen over the years that we've had some phenomenal engineers that came in entry level and became good contributors to teams and ultimately leaders in the company. And we've had widespread success. A lot of the people that started in Longview have wound up in leading plant sites across the United States, some outside the United States. And a lot of it's because the selection was so good for them. And that's why Gary uses this targeted selection interview and teaches it. And as I mentioned, Greg is recording this tonight so we can share it with others, those that missed tonight, and those at maybe other churches that might have an interest in this. So with that, I really appreciate Gary coming. And Gary, if you would come and tell us correct me where I've misspoken, or...
Well, I was really interested in seeing how you were going to work the words "odd ducks" into this talk. Now, I know what you were talking about. So it's just hit it on there. Okay. if I'd really done my preparation, I would have had some really good juicy stories to tell about. But David is a consummate engineer, very much a process-oriented person. Most engineers are. But he has a passion for people too. I'm not sure I've seen many engineers that have as much a passion for people as I have for the process. So that's what we really appreciate about David and all those years that I know that we worked together out of Eastman. So we're going to talk about targeted selection on. There's different things you could call this type of interviewing. You're going to get me around me.
Oh, here, a little bit.
So I don't. I know I need to stay fairly close to the camera because I do not talk loud at all. First of all, a little about me. I've worked at Eastman now almost 42 years. How many years did you work out? 41. 41. Okay. Got your feet. So,
Congratulations on surviving that long.
no, thanks. But it's been really fun. A lot of those years were in a financial vein. I did a lot of mergers, acquisition type work. And then about 24, 25 years ago, I got into human resources. And I've had a lot of good jobs at different sites. The most fun job I've ever had, and it's only 20% of my job, but it's these last dozen years actually doing recruiting. It's a blast. All of you in here before have been interviewed, I'm sure. And many of you interviewed other people. Oh, yeah. Good. So we're going to learn from each other. I may be able to take back some stuff I learned from you guys. Targeted selection is just, it's a really good method. We're going to try to share some best practices on how we do some of the interviewing. And, you were talking about the questions you had when you first started out that basically had yes or no answers probably and that sort of thing. The great thing about this targeted selection or behavioral interviewing technique is you're not asking yes or no questions. You're not asking them for what they typically do in this situation. You're asking them to tell you what did you do in a similar situation in the past. So they've got to give you factual stuff. And that's where you can really dig deep and get to know them maybe a little bit better. So, and I'm glad you got handouts because you can really follow along probably there a lot, maybe even better than here. But these are going to be real experiences that we're shooting to draw the answer out on. Pointed questions, and we're going to talk about this STAR technique that we try to pull out of the candidate when we're asking them questions. But all of this is based on the premise that your past performance is an indicator of future performance. So that's why we want to hear about their past experiences. This will travel.
Sure.
STAR. I won't overplay this too much, but basically, when you're looking for an answer, typically when we are looking for an answer when we're interviewing folks, we're saying, okay, we're looking for, so what was the context of the event? What was the situation or the task involved? And usually you'll get that answer on almost anything, any question you ask. But we'd also like to know what actions did the candidate take that directly affected that situation, and what were the results of those actions. And so that's what, when you hear STAR, and we use STAR a lot. In fact, most of the students on campus, they know this method. They know what we're looking for when we hit campus. So it's a fairly common technique. Asking, trying to get to the situation or task, what actions were taken by the candidate, and what were the results of those actions. Got a couple of examples here. I don't know how great they are. They came sort of training when we first did. I'll just read through a couple of these so you sort of get a flavor for what a complete answer might be. So in this case, I don't even know what the question is, but here's an answer, a potential answer. The Home Office Credit Department have recently begun refusing to honor any prices I quoted and charged to my customer, even though I had not received updated catalog prices. So they're setting the context for what the situation was right there. So I began asking my direct sales manager to authorize all my credit actions. So that's a specific action he took. And then that move got the home office off my back, and I figured my manager could handle the hassle. That was part of the job. So that was the result. I don't particularly like the tone of that answer, but it is a complete answer. I probably would have drilled down on some other things there. So we'll read through this other example. I already knew how much the drill bits cost, and how long it took to do a resharpening job, and what my time was worth per hour. Okay. I told my supervisor sorry that it would not be cost justified when he told me to spend 2 or 3 hours slaving over a bit sharpener. I'll probably drill down on that action right there. We're just trying to set the stage for what a star example looks like. He didn't like my answer. He went back to his desk, figured the cost, came back and apologized, and so forth. That was the result. So that's the kind of answer we're hoping to get out of candidates when we start asking these interview questions. And I'll tell you, you will rarely get a complete star when you ask a question the first time. Sometimes you will. So that's why you drill down a little bit deeper. If you're not quite understanding the situation, or what most people leave out when they're answering it, is what the result of it was. They can talk about the situation, maybe what they did. Lots of times they forget to tell you, okay, well, how did that turn out? There are ways you can drill down and get more info out of them. And that's really these 3 types of questions are all possible questions that you can ask. Behavioral, tell me about the time where you had to solve a problem. Heads up, that's what we're going to be talking about really in this whole context. That's the kind of questions you want to ask. Theoretical, what makes you think you were good at solving problems? Leading, yes, you found being a teammate would be very, very fulfilling. I'm going to guess back in the early days you were probably asking a lot of leading questions for our job. Sort of an IQ test, and we know what it say yes or no. So this will come more naturally to you as you do it. I can already tell you that the first interview you do, it's going to be a little awkward probably for you. But it's you develop your own style, and a lot of this stuff really starts coming naturally. If you start using the words, what do you usually do? Or typically in this situation, what do you do? You're sort of asking a theoretical question. They can almost come back and answer anything, and if it sounds good, okay. And we're really not looking for theoretical answers. You can ask leading yes or no questions, which are, once again, IQ tests. What we really want to do is ask the behavioral questions. Typically, and I tell all the candidates I interview this right in front, most of my questions are going to start off something like, can you tell me about a time when you did this or this or this? Because we're looking for actual experiences that you've had that help answer the question. So I sort of set that stage with the candidate fairly early in the interview, so they have an idea. They've got to give me an actual experience. We drill down on that if you don't get it. So we're looking for those star answers. We've got a few sheets here on addressing false stars. I'm not going to go through all these, but if you get an answer to a question, it's really more of an opinion. Like, I believe in going the extra mile with the customer. Okay, that's great. So tell me a time when you did do that. You're always drilling for what they did. All these questions you're asking are really more in the past tense. What did you do? How was it resolved? That sort of thing. As you go through these sheets here, and I'm not going to go through all of these, I'm going to just pick one on each screen. If they start getting theoretical with their answers, well, that situation taught me not only what to say next time, but what not to say. Okay, tell me about the time when you applied it. In other words, what did you do? How did you use that? Again, past tense type questions to get to what they actually did. And you're going to get a lot of vague answers. Many times the candidates really won't have an answer. When you don't have an answer, you sort of start not making stuff up, but saying stuff that really there's probably not a, you can't pinpoint that something really happened. Most of the time I was able to stay on top of the things I needed to attend to. Okay? So what did you do to stay on top of the things on a specific project? So you're always drilling down, and you'll get much more comfortable with drilling down the more you do this. Those of you that have kids, you've probably done this many times and may not even know you're using the behavioral interview approach. During the interview, again, I'm not sure how the interview is going to be structured, or if it's going to be a panel interview, or two people are going to be interviewing.
We don't need it yet.
Okay, very good. And you can do it in many different ways. You can have two people interview a candidate and ask a series of questions. And then you can have two more people interview that same candidate, ask a different series of questions, maybe along the same lines, but different questions. And so you get different people getting an idea of who this person is with different questions. Or you can have 6 of you in a room, all listening to the candidate at one time, asking questions, taking notes, and doing it that way. I'll leave that up to you, what you think will work is. And it may be time constraints, and some of you may drive what that decision is. I know at Eastman we typically do, in most cases, have 2 people. We interview a candidate back to back 45-minute interviews. 2 people come in with them for 45 minutes, then another 2 come in for 45 minutes, and then a third 2 comes in. Now I'll have different questions they are asking them. And so they all get together at the end of the day and say, okay, how did this particular candidate do? But we've also done it in the panel way, where everybody gets in a room and asks. But as far as notes, you're going to want to take notes. I know many of you probably have great memories. After you've interviewed 2 or 3 candidates, you're going to start overlapping answers. You won't be able to keep it straight. You really do need to take notes. And if you can focus on situation, task, actions, and results, that even makes it a little bit easier to take notes, because you're going to be taking notes in each one of those silos in each one of the questions. So you won't have to have long, drawn-out stuff. You can probably have some shorthand that works for you. Typically, if one person asks the questions and the other take notes, that's a good way of doing it, because that one person asking the question can always keep that eye contact and engaging the candidate all during the question and answer. So this last one, note behaviors during interview. Does the candidate maintain eye contact? And we may get into some other things in a while. Are they constantly toying with their shirt or their hair, or is there something that's distracting? And maybe they're just not comfortable, and they will get nervous. But I do look at behaviors a lot too. Are they constantly? What was the one not too long ago I had? That's one you'll get. I had one not too long ago that started their answer to almost every question. Well, if I'm being honest, well, after about the 5th or 6th time, I'm thinking, well, what do you usually know? So it's little things like that, and a lot of those are just nervous habits you're going to get into with folks. I don't have to tell most of you this. You want to be prepared for the interview. You want to have looked at their resume. What makes them a good candidate? Out of respect as much for them as for the process you're trying to do and select somebody. maintain an open mind. You will get an initial impression the first minute you meet somebody. You know, if they're somebody you used to play basketball or football against or that sort of thing. Okay, you've already got an impression of them, maybe a good impression or a bad impression. Please let the interview proceed as objectively as you can, and don't start going too far into biases. And we're going to talk about biases a little bit later in just a few minutes, but try to keep an open mind as you can. Relax the interviewee. The more conversational you make this, the more you smile, and the more you make eye contact, they will get relaxed. Really, the more relaxed they are, the more they will share with you. To a point where I've had times where I can't believe they shared some stuff with me that they did. They almost got too comfortable in the interview, which is not a bad thing if you really want to get to know them, but you can find out some things. Friendly, enthusiastic, empathetic. I probably don't have to go into too much of that with this group. You do want to stay on time, because I don't know if you're going to have these interviews back to back to back or what, but if you get off schedule and you have other things coming up right after the interview, it can really interrupt things down the line. So don't be afraid to keep the candidate on track, and you will have to do that sometimes. Sometimes they will, in order to try to provide you an answer when they really don't have an answer, they'll talk, and they'll keep talking, thinking that eventually that answer is going to come through, or they're going to think of one. And there are times you just have to say, well, okay, maybe paraphrase what they've said so they know you've listened to them, and then say, okay, well, okay, now let's go on to the next question. You will have to do that. I'm almost certain. Listen carefully. And that gets back to if they know you're listening. Once again, I don't probably have to preach this too much. And you're repeating back to them what they say every once in a while. Oh, so that's what happened. Then what did you do next? Well, that's interesting. I can see why you did that. If you're sort of repeating back, or they know that you're hearing what they're saying, they will go a little bit deeper in some of their answers, and really feel that you're a good friend. I'm gonna share this with you. And the more empathetic and reflective listening you can have, the more you can really learn. Once again, if you've got a partner, it's a lot easier if one's taking notes while one's asking the question. I think that sort of makes sense. We've talked about probing for details a little. You do want star answers, and you want to drill down enough until you get as much of a star answer as you can from the questions that you ask. Dig deeper on the answers. All behavioral interview questions are really open-ended questions. There is no yes, no. You have to give an experience. And I think that's the key there. They've got to give an experience. I really like this part about allowing silence. I can tell you a lot of interviews I've been in where as soon as I get through asking the question, the candidate immediately starts answering it, even if they don't have an answer. And so I go, yeah, that happens all the time. Maybe when I've, and they'll go on for about 20, 30 seconds like that sometimes, and they're searching for the answer. I really like the candidates that I'll ask a question, and if they don't have a ready answer, they'll say, it's a good question, let me think about that. And they may sit there for 10 or 15 seconds to think about it. And if you've never been in a room with just one other person, and 10 or 15 seconds, that's a long time. You are going to be wanting to fill that gap in that space. Don't just let it go. See how comfortable the person is with silence. See if they'll come up with something. Because usually the ones really think about it, they can come up with some really good examples.
You can get to feeling sorry for the person.
Yes.
You want to help them, but you know that's not the right thing to do.
Yeah, and so provide realistic information. So, usually in an interview, you're going to grade the interviewee, you're going to have some talk about some things on their resume, ask them about a couple of experiences they've had just to sort of set the stage. Then you'll get into your questions, and I typically have probably half a dozen questions I ask. We spend the majority of my 40-minute interviews usually when I interview people. And then sort of to try to wrap things up, you'll eventually ask them, okay, do they have any questions? And you always want to ask that because they're going to have questions. You want to be ready to answer their questions with information. Number one, because you want to make sure they've got the information they need to make their decision. You're not just interviewing them, they're really interviewing you too. So you want to make sure they've got their information. And you're really branding yourself and the church and the city sitting there discussing this stuff with them. I mean, you may not know it, but you're portraying a brand. Remain on schedule, we've talked about that. Don't be afraid to have your phone out or a clock on the wall. I try to make sure, and I know the candidates I interview always know that I'm making sure we're staying on schedule most of the time. At least, well, quite often when we're doing an interview. Oh, that last bit on always complete the interview evaluation. If you can sort of summarize your notes and have an idea of who that candidate is right after the interview instead of, going home that night after having 3 or 4 interviews in the day and then trying to do an evaluation on each one of them. It's much better if you can do it the quicker after the interview as possible. That probably should be make a lot of sense there. Evaluate the candidate against the job while you're interviewing them. There will come a time where you're going to be evaluating the candidates against each other, obviously, because you're going to want to select them. But during that interview, there is no other candidate. We're going to get into that, some of these biases in just a second. It's just that person you're interviewing and no one else. Okay. We've got, I don't know how many pages of biases here, and I'm not going to go spend a lot of time on this. I just wanted to hit on it because we all have biases, unconscious biases on a lot of different things. That sort of have to be on guard for a little bit. Stereotyping people based on culture or gender. I think that goes without saying. That's probably the biggest one that's going to leap out that you're going to want to guard against. But there are others that you probably don't think about quite as much. One of the things we always do, and I would make a point that you probably want to do this, is that next bullet. Make sure you ask them the same questions of every candidate, because that's really the only way you're going to be able to compare them in the end, is if you have asked them all the exact same questions. And don't change it up just because, this one candidate, they're a runner, and I'm a runner, so I always have to ask about that a little bit in the warm-up to the interview. But make sure you're asking the same questions of every single candidate. First impression error, says what it is. You see someone, you make a judgment, whether good or bad. Oh yeah, I really like this person for whatever reason. And actually both of those biases are about the same thing. You have a really good first impression, or you have a negative emphasis on something that you saw on your first take with that person. Halo horn effect, I feel almost weird about talking about that in the church. But basically this person has just got this one great thing about them. And it doesn't really matter how they answer any other question. We really like this one thing. Well, I would guard against that and the reverse of that. If they've got this really one bad thing, like they played football at Pine Tree. Yeah,
Pine Tree or Carthage, I mean, what else is there? I mean, come on.
we had this discussion before y'all got here. You don't want that to negatively affect how you think about it. And you may catch yourself during an interview thinking, probably need to erase that from my mind or whatever, because some of these will hit you as you go through them. I mentioned a little while ago people that play with their hair, their clothes, that sort of thing. That is sort of distracting. Try to give the person as much attention and be as fair to them as you can. Candidates who come in either after a really weak, you've had a really weak candidate, the next one, that makes the next one look really good, or you just had a really great candidate, so the next candidate comes in and they're probably just not going to look as good in contrast to the one you just talked to. So try to make sure you're evaluating every candidate in that interview at the time you're talking with them. No one else exists, it's just you and them. You can do all your comparisons later when you get your notes done and you're evaluating everything.
So you're saying that if you let that strong one influence you on the next one, then maybe you'll give the next one a fair chance to demonstrate that they're strong as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a better way of putting it, David. Thanks. Okay. So I know you guys, we've got 2 search committees that are going to be taking part, right? And I know you guys have some questions, or so this is part of what the committee's been charged with. So this develop a vision for the qualifications and personal qualities of the person to fill the position and develop a set of questions. So maybe do we want to take just a minute or two here to maybe talk about what qualities and personal traits are we looking for in some of these?
Can I ask one question before you go right there about what we've covered? Do you fight through the interview process? You know what the fit is of what you're looking for? Do you kind of go through that process and you're going as you go along saying that's really a fit at our church in our situation, or do you try to set those things aside until you get through everybody?
We actually have one of the 6 categories or dimensions and questions that we will ask people at Eastman is job fit. And job fit can be many things. Geographically, are they a fit? Would they come here? Would they stay here? With this particular group, do they seem like they would be a fit and get along with everyone? So we put some weight just around job fit and ask questions sort of directed at that. So you will.
So you do it as a specific part of the process.
Right.
Okay.
So, I'm not sure exactly what qualities that come to your mind we're looking for. It's both a youth minister and a minister of education and administration. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, probably certain qualities would come to my mind.
Let's give him some.
Yeah.
You know, come up with some personal qualities you give up for.
Showing up every day. That's one thing that my girlfriend, in her words, she works in insurance. Bobby knows.
Yes.
But out of about 7 or 8 people in their group, there's always 2 or 3 that aren't there or came home sick. Or and to me, being present, you've heard the adage, being there's 90% of the job or whatever. That would definitely be something I look for. But I don't know. Yes, dependability.
Yeah.
I think there's another level to being present too. You can be there and not be present.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, the stability goes along with that. You see them that are somewhere every 2 years, and they're either not happy or there's some issue that with that stability or consistency.
This is a people business.
Mhm.
We can't hire monks, we need to hire ministers.
So that's so we have a no monk policy. Okay, I just want to see if no monk policy.
That wasn't on his search, was it?
Yeah, I
So we don't like resumes to throw out right off the bat. That was a month.
Monastery.
So now, interpersonal relations, what kind of things are we looking for there?
Well, we need someone that is a good communicator and that has a good attitude, the only thing I come up with, but someone that other staff members would feel comfortable talking to and not,
Kind of goes back to the fit.
and, it's a church, we need people.
One, I know in the youth they're going to be a little different, but the administrative education, when we did a search, was Dr. Pete, the whole church, they did a little circle and took pastoral care, administration, and preaching, and rated those as to importance. And I think we have to, in that, the administrative education person, we're going to have to look for those skills and which of those are most important. Because it was insinuated they'd be preaching some. Maybe the youth minister preaches some. But that's not what we're hiring them for. Even though it's great, but we want to make sure that's not the top skill we're looking for.
Yeah, it needs to match up with the rest of the staff.
I'll say 2 skill sets for both positions. 1, approachable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that fits for both positions. And 2, teachable.
What kind of star type questions do we ask someone about that would draw out how approachable they are?
Do people roll their eyes when they see you coming?
Out loud!
I gotta twist that around a little bit.
So that's what I'm saying. We've got to think back for both jobs, and this is kind of interweaving. I'm doing the youth part of it, but think back to scenarios that we know happen in churches. Those situations, or even something you've had where we can ask them to share their experience about how they handle that situation.
That's a really good way to approach this.
Because there's going to be those things.
They are, yeah.
We've got to just take a few minutes and think about them. There's going to be those things. We've all had those interactions.
Well, both of these positions too are going to need to be able to handle conflict, handle somebody being mad at them, and not run and hide behind Glenn whenever somebody gets mad at them. That was going to be my question. But both are going to need to know how to handle adult conflict.
So tell me about a time when a church member came to you and we had to resolve a conflict, or when a church member was mad at you and you had to handle that. What did you do and what were the actions?
And if you wanted to specify, like for the youth pastor, how did you handle it when a parent came and was angry because of A, what you told the child, or B, what the child said, but as a specific something with an angry parent? Because I think you're going to have, I would think you would have that more with
That's
the
a good
youth.
drill down. I guarantee you every youth minister has had one of those experiences.
And how do you handle that specific?
We don't have a flip chart, that's okay, we're recording this, so we're gonna remember.
We can rewind it, go back if we need to.
But I like the idea of okay, what experiences have you seen in the church that you can formulate a question that you can then ask them?
They're there for each one of us. I promise they're there. We just got to think about those. So that's our homework as a group, I guess, is to think further about those, to formulate these questions.
Yeah. How did you handle it when that person in the church comes to you?
That person in quotes,
Yeah. That person, because you know who it is.
And they'll know what that means. Because
Absolutely.
anybody that's been
How did you deal with the Bobby of your church?
And that could be good or bad, too. like we talked about.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
That's a good point. We tend to focus on the negative, but we would also
Yeah.
say, tell me about a time when you had a youth that was reserved from the youth group and you wanted to engage them more, to make them feel better about being part of the group. How did you draw them out and reinforce them becoming more part of the youth ministry?
If they don't have an answer, they can just say, I never had a youth like that.
And then we'll know really quickly
Yeah,
what.
that's inadequate information on that interview.
Yeah.
They didn't know either.
Maybe there's a star model, you're starting to see it take shape and how effective it can be for you.
Well, so from the office, one thing that's going to be important for us is that they have some strong points that aren't represented on the team now. I mean, we're going to gravitate to things we like in existing ministers. We've got that position on the team. I've got a basketball team. I don't need 5 centers. I need, so that's
You need somebody to play defense, don't you?
sometimes.
Yeah, can't all shooters. Gotta have some defense.
Well, to do a devil's advocate, how did you handle a situation when like the senior pastor or your committee wanted you to do something and that's not what you felt was the right thing? Because I feel like that's going to happen sometimes, but how do you handle that situation?
Y'all respond on y'all have some good questions.
Yeah, and the other thing is we need to interaction with the staff, because that's not only filling a role in our church, but
Right, yes.
team.
That really gets back to the overall relationships.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to drill down on.
So we're going to be looking for a lot of qualities, and when we narrow those down to the most important ones, that's when we really need to be able to refer back to, okay, how are we going to get that reflected in an experience and a STAR type of question and response.
Are we looking for, do we need to, in our minds, identify the top 3 things we've got to have for the youth minister and the educational person? Is that kind of where you're, because they're not going to have them all.
Right, and I don't know whether the right number's 3 or 5,
Yeah.
whatever it is, but I think we do need to say, and not necessarily reflect on our most recent experience, but, think back to when we had someone who was really successful in that, what did that look like? I think we're going to narrow it down some, but I think if we follow the model that Gary's suggesting, we have 3 interviews with each candidate that we've narrowed the field down to. We've had 3 interviews with 2-on-1. I think it's plenty. You have a mob attacking one person. I think
That could be intimidating.
it's intimidating, and I think I'd probably lock up on one of those type of situations. But I think we can ask a lot of questions, get a lot of insights in a fairly short period of time by splitting it up.
So, question, and it doesn't have to be this way, but in non-church world, a lot of interviews, it's a day long and just folks coming through, and you interview 10, 12, 15 people. As a rule, you never do that in the church world. You narrow down to 2 or 3. And so it's not a huge group, but if that's the approach we're taking, and there's lots of reasons that it's that way in the church world, how do we attack that?
We typically, at Eastman, when hiring engineers, I'll put it in
Sure.
So we may have a lot of people apply, and we can sort of screen out the ones that maybe they did hop from job to job every 2 years. Maybe they don't have quite the qualification. We can narrow down the applicants to a few. And I've found in my campus interviewing anyways, typically I interview 5 people, get that one that I want to bring back to the site to let my hiring manager talk to. So I may do 100 interviews on campus to find 20 people that we're going to bring back to interview, and we may only make 5 to 10 offers of those 20 people. So I mean, you may have to interview a few to get down to that. I would look at some sort of pre-screening on all those applicants to get down to what you really want to talk to. You will probably be able to do that. I don't know what the number of applicants do.
That's what I was just gonna
I
ask,
don't
is
think it'd be that many.
what is the
Depends on
typical
position.
number?
Depends on the position.
Yeah, I mean,
We found we had a stack of interviews, of resumes for his position, the senior pastor. But then our youth pastor stack was like this. It just depends on the position, I think, too. And so we had for the senior pastor search, we had a set of criteria that you had to match. It's like, oh, no, don't have this. You go this pile. You go this pile. We get into this. Okay, now you don't have this. And then we all started listening to them. We listened to them, asked them to send us YouTubes and things like that so we could hear them preach. Before going to see anybody or actually talking to them, things like that. Listening for qualities in that preaching type thing. And then we all shared our experiences from listening to those things. Bobby and I were both on that one.
We're gonna have a hard time getting videos of them administrating.
I know. But I think we're going to see a difference in the pool of applicants based on the type of positions.
right. Well, let me say too, a lot of, there are senior pastors that are good administrators, but often the qualities we're looking for in a pastor are not readily there in an administrator. And so we need to recognize that what we need is a good administrator for that position.
In my thought process, because I was comparing like Rhonda, I've been on a couple of pastor search committees. I think we need to be thinking, where do we want to be? Where do we want to end up? And who can get us there? Because we've had, on the education side, we had David Hampton for a long, long time, and he had some great skills at what he did. But is that where, and then Dr. Peak took over, and from that standpoint, where do we want to end up? The youth, we have a pretty good vision of the last, 2 or 3 guys that you can kind of see where you want to be. And I think we've got to lean on Glenn a little bit to give us what the total staff's vision is to guide us, because we need that input, I think, on both sides.
We could send them on that scavenger hunt and see how they all interact.
We could do that too.
Yeah, some people will be gone in our.
I don't like this.
And then they never find crazy ladies.
That's right.
Well, we are meeting with the other 2 staff members Sunday, the personnel team is, to get a feel for what is their vision for their ministry, and is there anything that they would like to venture into as kind of if the major is in children's ministry, do they have a minor that they would like to really be able to contribute to the church in? And that may affect how we present the 2 new positions that we're filling.
I had a question, it's a little off topic now, but as far as the interview questions, if you're breaking up into teams, does the same person, 2 people ask the same questions with each interview? Or do you mix up the questions? Or for like myself, I feel like, and Rhonda, because we are with the youth a little more than everyone else in here for our committee, we would ask things that we might be able to ask follow-up questions better because we see how the interaction with the kids. But I mean, just a thought as far as who asks what questions, so that the follow-up questions don't, they come more natural or not. Does that make sense?
I think it makes, the way we typically do it is, okay, you 2, this particular team of 2 has this set of questions. That's the questions you're going to ask this interviewer, this interviewee, and the next one, and the next one. And actually with each with each interview, you become a lot more conversational and comfortable with asking those questions and knowing how to follow up on them. That next interview team is going to have a different set of questions.
Right.
Won't be exactly the same as the first, but along some of the same dimension. They may have a different question on establishing personal relationship than maybe the first team did. But if you're asking the same questions of 4 candidates, you're hearing something and can compare, and in the end you can compare all those answers between those 4 candidates. And if you're asking one set of questions to this candidate and a different set of questions to this candidate, and then it becomes because all of you have a different level of comfort at scoring people. If you're scoring on a scale of 1 to 5, I guarantee you there's people in this room that almost everybody is a 5. And there's people in this room that's going to be hard to get over a 2 or a 3. And that's just human nature. So it's good if you're sort of assessing in your head, here's how this person answered these questions, and sort of how I think that they compare to each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's how I envisioned it in my head, was asking the same question, so then you can compare and contrast the candidates, not the different questions. And
It becomes apples and oranges otherwise.
right,
And it's-
absolutely.
And what you're going to find is that when you're assessing all these 4 candidates in a big group, you're going to say, well, this person really answered this question about as good as I've heard anyone. And that second interview team, they'll have someone said, well, we asked them a similar question along those same lines, and they couldn't really come up with an answer. And that's sort of good to hear different feedback from different people. You can get a little clarity when everyone can discuss their different interviews and how they perceive the person. That really helps. So does everybody have a homework assignment? Is that what I'm
Well,
hearing?
we will have ultimately, when we've brainstormed and developed that list of qualifications and personal qualities, and we'll each take some of those and try and develop some questions that we can throw out for our respective teams to consider. How we can use those. Okay?
I'm excited for you guys.
It's great.
It's pretty neat.
Thank you, Gary, for
Oh, this
helping us out this way.
was fun. I'm not sure to be doing this and working with you on a discipline problem at work.